It's far more glamorous than it sounds, but it's a really good opportunity. I think it's often, as Shelley said, if you're in a district or a borough, then you probably won't experience it. Although in theory you should, because as I go through the presentation, you'll start to understand that even at a district or borough level, you should be considering minerals and waste. Tiny bit about me. I've been with East Sussex County Council for this year will be 37 years. So in for the duration, I think. I've been in my current role as a team manager for 16 years. And I have to say, I mean, I'm very passionate about minerals and waste, but particularly about enforcement as well, which I will cover on this, because obviously it's everyone, all authorities deal with enforcement, but obviously what we deal with is slightly more tricky sometimes. Just in terms of the team I manage, it is a small team, but what's nice about it is, as the title says, we're the Planning Policy and Development Management team. So we cover planning policy and then development manager as well. So, officers get an opportunity to rotate in all the different disciplines of planning, which is really, really good. And I think it's an ideal opportunity, particularly people at the start of the career, to delve into the different aspects. And so I'm probably now going to embarrass myself by trying to share the slides. So please bear with me. Okay, I'm hoping.
Yeah, we can see that come up. Yeah,
perfect. Okay, let's just go back to the thing. Okay. Obviously, I can't see anyone, so if anyone does have, as Shelley said, there'll be time at the end for questions, but if anyone does have anything whilst I'm going through, please feel free to put your hands up. But Shelley, if anyone does, if you could just let me know. Okay, so I've introduced myself. So this is just an overview of what we're going to cover. So at East Sussex, we are the County Planning Authority, and we cover the whole of the administrative boundary of East Sussex, excluding the South Downs National Park Authority, because obviously they are a planning authority in their own right. We don't do general householder applications, commercial stuff, that sort of thing. Our responsibilities relate to minerals and waste and the council's own development. But as I say, it's key to remember that we are a planning authority. So I think I've got an hour and a half. So it is going to be a real whistle-stop tour of the work that we do. So I'm just going to touch a bit on the planning policy side of things, the development management. So that would be sort of pre-apps and the applications, and then what's often referred to as a Cinderella of the service, sort of planning enforcement, and then sort of the role that we have in site monitoring. There are a lot of slides, but there are photographs and things, so hopefully it won't be too tedious just reading sort of text on the screen. In terms of sort of training for minerals and waste, I know that the University at Brighton does a specific module or a session on waste and minerals planning. I don't know whether other universities do, but the RTPI do run a waste course or a conference, and also a minerals one in conjunction with the Minerals Products Association. So if by the end of this session your interest is piqued, then please do investigate those various courses. So in terms of planning policy, one thing I would say is obviously at districts and unitary level, boroughs, you produce a local plan. Well, so do we. The difference for us is it's solely related to minerals and waste. So we have the minerals local plan. It's really important to remember that it forms part of the development plan. So when you're considering planning applications, even if you think it's something which is nothing to do with minerals and waste, it may well be. I'm thinking probably more the larger scale applications where you might be, say, generating a lot of waste and things, or just that. So do bear in mind that a waste and minerals plan is part of the development plan. So just got on the slide here a series of things that we've done, sort of a programme. So the SBD that we've got there in construction and demolition waste, although it's 20 years old, it's still really relevant. And this is talking about sustainable use and everything, minimising the waste during construction, utilising it on sites, that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a forerunner really to the circular economy, that side of things. It's just trying to make sort of developers think about, okay, well, if we're going to be doing a development, how do I minimise or keep and reuse on site the waste that I generate? Then we've got the Waste and Minerals Local Plan, which we adopted in 2013. Prior to this, we had a Waste Local Plan and a separate Minerals Local Plan, which we combined in 2013. What that didn't do is it didn't identify specific sites for, it had some hang-ups from the previous Waste Local Plan and Minerals Local Plan, but it didn't identify any new sites for waste. So what we did was in 2017, we adopted a Waste and Mineral Sites Plan. So that identified specific sites for waste management purposes. At the time, we didn't think we needed to identify any new mineral sites, but during the Waste and Mineral Sites Plan examination, it got flagged up that we would run out of certain minerals and aggregates, which is what prompted the partial review of the Waste and Minerals Plan, which we went through just as COVID was kicking off. So it did take rather a long time, but we actually adopted that in October last year, and we're now looking to do a full review of the Waste and Minerals Plan. With the Waste and Minerals Plan, this is where we absorb information, because what we need to do is we need to identify in terms of minerals what construction's coming forwards, what need is there going to be. So we look at what other local plans that cover East Sussex are saying in terms of housing in the future and everything. We look at what applications may well have been determined and everything. So it's very much about planning so that we can say, okay, we know this development, this growth, everything is coming forward. We need to make sure we plan in our local plan for sufficient minerals to provide that development. And then equally with the waste side of things, we need to look at, say, okay, well, what waste capacity do we have currently that's out there? And then looking at trends and increase in populations, development, everything, what additional facilities, what might we need to deal with the waste going forward? So that's very much what a waste minerals plan is looking at, and obviously it will identify different sites for both waste and minerals. But it's not just the plan that we deal with. So the policy work also involves, we obviously, I think probably many of you refer to it as an LDS, but we've got a Minerals and Waste Development Scheme. We've also got a local aggregates assessment, which we produce, which that basically looks back at sales data and extraction levels and things for minerals and waste, so that or aggregates, so that we can then say, okay, how much we're providing, how much do we need, looking then at what reserves we've got, and again identifying if there's going to be a shortfall. Annual monitoring report, again, other authorities produce these as well, and that's just basically monitoring the implementation and use of the waste and minerals policies. It's a really useful gauge for how good policies are and how frequently they're used, and if they're not being used, then it helps us to look at, say, well, why isn't it being used, which then informs when we do a review. So the NPPF, when that came out and sort of like got rid of thousands of pages of other guidance, it has a section on minerals, and obviously we're required to provide an adequate supply of minerals and everything. What it was absolutely silent on was waste. So waste doesn't feature in the NPPF. So we had to wait a couple of years, but then we got this National Planning Policy for Waste came out in 2014. The bit that I've highlighted here is, or the section I pulled out here is, this is to do with determining planning applications for non-waste development. So this is where lower tier authorities or unitaries need to bear in mind some of these things. So it's not a case of, because you're not a minerals and waste authority, you don't have to consider it. You very much do. And again, much of this is saying about, okay, what sites are there, minimising waste in the construction, how to handle it, utilising it on site and everything. So it's trying to get the decision maker to think, okay, the end purpose of this development is not minerals and waste, but during the course of it, actually, there probably is going to be a waste element involved in it. So that's quite important. And then, sorry, that forward too. Okay. So these in our waste, obviously we've got lots of policies in our waste and minerals local plan. A lot of them are related solely to minerals and waste applications that we would be dealing with as the county planning authority, but there are the ones I've listed here are all ones, and in the supporting text to it, they do imply that local planning authorities should be using these. And so again, this is where, and I go back to saying this is part of the development plan. And obviously, if you look at section 38 of the Act, you must take into account the development plan. So your local waste and minerals plan is part of that. So they're just things to think of. And I will cover some district applications later on, just to show where, if some of these have been applied, then certain developments may not have happened. So that was really briefly policy. Obviously, there's way much more to it, but I think the sort of the nitty-gritty stuff is really development management and enforcement site monitoring. So we don't do householder applications, we don't do commercial, recreational, that sort of thing. So we solely deal with planning applications relating to the county council zone development and county matters. So we are very limited in that respect. I've just put this slide up, and I know there's certainly one listener on the call who hopefully will be able to recite this, but it's just really putting into context of it. Again, we work under exactly the same legislation as Town and Country Planning Act, and obviously development is as it's sort of stated on the slide there. Obviously, you get permitted development, so you've either got express permission or deemed permission. But again, I'm just trying to emphasise that we work under the same legislation. It's just that we have different considerations in terms of what we do. So just very briefly, because obviously it's not the focus of this session for county council development, but I thought I'd just give an indication as to what sort of things we do. It can be challenging because when we're determining a county council application, we're the applicant and the decision maker. And so that can be really, really challenging sometimes, and particularly in the perception of the public. It can be, well, you're judge, jury and executioner. How can you possibly make a rational decision? So things can be challenging, but this is why we have transparency. We make sure that, you know, everything is, if, say, for example, we had an application for a household waste site, which our department deals with. It wouldn't be a report or a decision by the director. It would come down to the head of service level or myself. So it's keeping those transparencies. But just some examples there of what we do. So libraries, schools, resource centres, basically any service that the county council provides and needs development for, then we would deal with that. Just some examples there. The top left, the road there is, this one here is the Bexhill Hastings Link Road. It's a £120 million road scheme that we were involved in. Very controversial, went through really exceptionally sensitive sites and everything, huge amounts of mitigation and everything. You know, that's one extreme of it really. And we've got a 20-year monitoring period for all the ecological enhancements on that. The middle photograph is a new primary school. So just an example there, which they don't come along very often, but it's really exciting when you do get new builds like that. And then the other one is just an extension to a library. So those are sort of the county council ones. One thing we can't do is we can't enforce ourselves against ourselves. So it does make it quite interesting when breaches of planning control do occur, which I'm pleased to say isn't necessarily very often, or if it is, then it's resolved easily. So the county matters, as they're referred to. So with the Minerals and Waste Planning Authority, and say we deal with minerals, and just put some examples on there. So these relate to ones that we have in the county. There are many, many, many more minerals than that, but obviously you can only find minerals where they exist in the ground. So other authorities have many more different types of minerals, but we don't, so it's limited to these. We do have hydrocarbons, so oil and gas, and we would be the authority that would deal with any fracking applications. Fortunately, we haven't had any. We had some exploratory wells in the Ashdown Forest, so Winnie the Pooh's dumping ground, in the sort of the late 80s, early 90s, but there's been nothing since. And we've got one petroleum exploration development licence that covers about 20 square kilometres of the county, but there's been nothing come forward at all. So we're very fortunate in that respect. So waste, yeah, again, I put on there the types of things that we deal with. And it can be again, I've got slides that show you, but the scale of the facilities can vary hugely. You can have something with, say, an energy recovery facility, because I'm not allowed to say the I word, it's not incineration, it's energy recovery, but something that would take, you know, a huge facility, can take all of the waste, household waste for the county that's not recycled, 235,000 tonnes a year. So you can have that extreme, a wastewater treatment work that would deal with the likes of Brighton and Hove, that then comes into East Sussex for treatment. But right down to small scale, you might have a small unit on an industrial estate, and it's a guy that goes around and collects cardboard from businesses, packages it up, and away it goes. Or a little village wastewater treatment works, so it's a treatment package purely for that. So it varies hugely. We do deal with animal disposal facilities because animals are classed as waste. We don't deal with crematoriums because humans aren't classed as waste when they're dead, whereas animals are. So that can be quite challenging sometimes. And I've just put some other engineering operations on there, and again, I'll come to that later. So that's generally sort of what we do. Obviously, waste is evolving, technologies are evolving. And one thing I would say is that, I mean, the authorised disposal of waste is hugely expensive, which is why you do see a lot of unauthorised activity. So I'm just going to go through some photographs of some mineral sites that we've got. As I said earlier on, there are many, many more types of mineral than this, but obviously I can only show you or talk about what I know in terms of what we have in the county. So different sites here. The top two are a clay pit. And then the photograph on the left-hand side, you can just in the distance see a factory on the right-hand side, little chimney sticking up. So this basically is a brickworks. So we've got clay pits. There are two clay pits at this particular one. They extract the clay and then it goes and it's made into bricks and then it's shipped around the country. The brickworks rely on other minerals providers and aggregate providers because they need things like sand to go into the mix and everything. So it's quite an interdependent industry. But we've got 4 large sites like these clay pits, and we've also got 2 small handmade tile and brick ones where you literally get people hand making them and they're just tiny extraction, and then they do that. What tends to happen with minerals when they extract the clay is they do it on a campaign basis. So it's not that they're extracting all of the time. What they'll do is they might have an 8-week period where they'll extract and then they'll stockpile it and then use it that way. Which is good because it does then minimise the sort of potential disruption. So the bottom left one, I'm hoping that you're seeing these the same way I am. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit odd. But the bottom left one is a soft sand site. So that's classed as building sand. It's very different to sharp sand for sort of the properties and then what they're used for. We only have a very limited bit within the county, and it actually falls within the part that's in the national park. And then the one bottom right is obviously chalk. And we have an abundance of chalk down sort of the South Downs and everything, but we don't currently have any active chalk pits anymore because the tendency for people wanting Artex ceilings and that sort of thing, nobody wanted that, and so there's been a decline in it. So all of the working ones that we have now been restored, so we don't actually have any active ones, but there's nothing to say that if the need arose then they couldn't be brought back, because the one in here in particular is Tarring Neville, just outside Newhaven. That used to be extracted solely for use in the Artex factory in Newhaven. But there's probably, if they resumed production, there's probably about 40 years of reserves there. So there's a lot of chalk. Okay. So this is Land 1 sharp sand and gravel. So it's very different to the building sand, the soft sand. This is the only active quarry we have. And it's going to be running out they have to cease extraction in January 27 and restore the site by January 2028. So what that means is when the NPPF says that we should have a land bank of 7 years supply for Land 1 aggregates and things, we don't have that. So we are going to be reliant solely on imported sand and gravel, because this will be the end. We won't have any others. The operator did put in for an extension. When we did the sites plan, they put in a proposal for an extension. No, sorry, when we did the review of the plan, they put in a proposal to extend it. The trouble is it's got so many designations. We've got European designations, it's triple SI and everything. And we had strong objections from Natural England because to basically extract further would cause irreversible harm to the designation. It was a geomorphology. So we took it through examination and we basically were able to demonstrate we can rely on imported sand and gravel. We've got the facilities for those. So that's been quite challenging, and it was quite a thing to get through. But it's, so we haven't got very long left of that. But then what will happen, and one of the good things with minerals is the restoration of them. And I've just got this one here. I did borrow that photograph from Nature After Minerals, which is a great website to go onto and everything, loads of stuff that hopefully the link will work if you get sent the slides around and everything. But one of the great things about minerals is the restoration that can be achieved. And historically, sort of BNG and everything has always been overachieved by mineral sites, things. So sometimes you'll get a clay pit or an old quarry like this, and the restoration is to fill it and return it back to either farmland, grassland, whatever, or create habitats like this. So that's really good and a really positive thing. And I think the minerals industry probably will get wise to the fact that they can create, way over 10% BNG, and so I'm sure that then they start selling the credits and everything. But the other thing with minerals is that it's classed as a temporary use. And so once the minerals is finished and it's restored, it's classed as undeveloped land. So on the basis that we're going to be losing or ceasing to have any land on aggregates, that's why we're really reliant on imports. So in terms of the plan area, we've got 3 ports. We've got Rye Port, which is fairly small. It's constrained for the size of boats that it can receive. We've got Newhaven Port, which is this photograph here. And then because we do joint plan working with Brighton and Hove City Council and National Park, we've also got half of Shoreham Harbour. So 3 really important ones. What's becoming more important is this one in Newhaven, because the operator that had the quarry that's running out, they're basically operating this site in Newhaven. So they've now got a facility. They've got planning permission back in, I think it was 2028, for aggregate processing, concrete batching and bagging plant. They bring everything in by ship. So this is all marine dredged. We don't deal with the licenses for marine dredging. That's dealt with by the Crown Estate and the MMO. They do the marine planning side of things. But so materials are brought in here and they're processed, they're bagged on site and everything. And then probably about 50% goes off by train and it serves a lot of London. And then the rest goes out by road and sort of serving East Sussex. So this has been happening for a little while. So it's sort of, as facilities here increase, that will sort of complement or sort of run alongside the winding down of the other quarry. But the fact that stuff goes out by rail is really good. So this is just the gravel path, if you like. So the top right, you've got, this is coming off the dredger. So there's a conveyor that comes off the dredger and it goes onto an overhead conveyor. Which then takes it into the processing plant, which is the top right, and it goes up those conveyors into the building, and it goes through a washing and screening process. So that sort of processes it down and everything, and then splits it into the different size grades, which is what you can see where the dumper truck is on the bottom left. So it's sorted into different grades, different sizes of sort of sand and gravel. And then the building behind where you can see the dumper truck, that basically then scoops up material and puts it into the bags, which you can see in the bottom right. So if you go to your B&Q, whether it's a small sort of like 20-kilo bag or whether it's a big ton bag or Parker building, in no particular order at all, but so that's where it all comes from. It's all bagged up there and goes off. And I say that this for us is a really important facility. And then just some more minerals sites. So the 2 on the left-hand side, this again is in Newhaven, but the one at the top where you've got 3 people in it, that's a wharf. And so crushed rock and aggregates comes in by ship to there. And then it goes to the site to the north of it, which is the bottom left picture. And that's an asphalt plant. And then they recycle asphalt as well. So quite a large scale one, just on the same picture, actually. Say North Quay, Newhaven is, there are a lot of waste uses there. So to the north of the asphalt plant, you've got a scrap metal one. To the north of that, you've got a waste transfer station. And in the back, you can see is the energy recovery facility. So a lot of activity going on there. And then the 2 photographs on the right are just, again, these are the ones where the materials comes into the ship with the previous slides I've just shown you. And beautiful setting right on the beach. You can see lovely Seaford Head in the distance there and everything. Not quite so nice when it's windy, but again, it's a really important site now. So yes, trying to get too excited yet. This is the most exciting thing. We do have a mine in East Sussex. So this is a gypsum mine. It's absolutely fantastic. It's hugely strategically important for what it provides. So it's basically done. So gypsum it goes into so many different things, but plasterboard, concrete cement, that sort of thing. For ladies that powder their nose, you're probably doing it with a bit of gypsum in there, that sort of thing. So many different things, but it's strategically, it's a hugely important site for us. So what they do is they do it on the room and what's called a room and pillar basis. So the top left photograph effectively is a pillar. And what they do is they do blasting around it to create voids, which would be the rooms. So at the moment, when you go down the mine shaft, you go down probably about 1,000 feet. It's on different seams. They've got, I think, 3 levels when you go down. And then it spreads out. I think the last time I went down, I ended up about 3.5 kilometres from the mine shaft underground. So there's so many reserves. There's loads there. But basically what they do is, obviously you can see the machinery there. So they do the blasting. They do it, I think it's, I'm going to say about once a week. Obviously depends on what they need. But they so the shift workers, they go down for 12 hours. Everything they need is down there. They don't emerge during those 12 hours. And then basically everything is down there. And what happens, and this is really exciting as well. So once they've blasted and they processed it, it goes onto the conveyor, which is the bottom left-hand photograph. And then on the right-hand side, as it emerges out of the mine, and then it goes on this overland conveyor, because where it's then processed and made into plasterboard and other products is quite a way away from the actual mine entrance. So just to show you there, so the red dot on the top left is where the mine is, and that's where it comes out of the mine. And then you can see the conveyor belt on there, and it goes all the way along to the red dot on the right-hand side. So it's just over 3 miles on the conveyor for it to be processed. And historically, that's because this is the Brightling mine. There was also a Mountfield mine, which was closer to the works and everything. So historically, obviously, it's far better to put in a conveyor than up sticks the processing plant. The other good thing with the works here is the factory element of it is there's a railhead there. So stuff comes in and goes out by rail. So we import desulfured gypsum from Spain, but that comes in by train. So it's quite sustainable. Again, with all of minerals, you can only extract them where they exist. So we're very mindful. There's a lot of ancient woodland here. It's in the Highwood National Landscape and everything. But it's you have to sort of weigh up and just make sure that they can compensate, mitigate everything. So that's quite exciting. So the other wonderful world that we deal with is waste. And I think the trouble with waste is everyone has this perception that it's dirty, horrible, smelly, and everything. It's going to be awful. And so I think a lot of what we do is trying to educate, certainly when we're doing the policy work, the plan work, is to try and explain to people that's not necessarily what it means. It could be this guy with the cardboard, or, if you ask people where they live and you say, oh, well, there are 3 waste sites within a mile of you. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. So it's really people's perception. It really is. But at the end of the day, we have to deal with the waste that everyone generates. And so I think that's half our battle, is the education and just getting the message out. And I think if a lot of people went to some of these waste sites, they'd be absolutely amazed at how clean they are and the technology involved. So I'm just going to give you some examples of waste sites. So the top left one, that's a composting facility, which is classed as open windrow. So basically that's all out in the open. So the green waste, so I don't know if your councils do a garden waste collection, or you take green waste to your local tip and everything, it will end up somewhere like this. And then basically what happens is it goes through a shredder, and then it's put into these windrows, which are basically long piles of it, and then it's turned on a regular basis, and the heat causes it to sort of decompose down. You end up with a nice compost at the end of it. So that's a fairly basic outdoor one. The building on the right-hand side is what we call an IVC, so that's an in-vessel composting. So basically, it's exactly the same what happens as the open windrow, but it's all done in the building. So it will go in, be shredded down, then it goes into maturation halls and it's rotated. The difference is that it's a far quicker process. It might take, say, 12 weeks with the open windrows, but you can probably do it in 6 to 8 in an in-vessel facility. When I said earlier that people have this perception that it's dirty, smelly, horrible, and everything, what I would say, if anyone ever gets the opportunity to go to an IVC, an in-vessel composting facility, do it as your last site visit. Don't use public transport, because even if they give you effectively a bodysuit to wear, you still come out honking a bit. So and go in the winter, because they are very, very warm in there. One of the things we are experiencing as well is obviously the government's drive to make sure that local authorities are going to impose that they have to do food waste collections, that sort of thing. So that will impact on us, because at the moment there's a restriction on the tonnage of green waste that can go into this IVC facility, but also within that tonnage there's a limit on how much bio waste or food waste can go in. So what we'll probably start to find is that operators may need to come to us and say, actually, we need to increase this. So that's not necessarily the overall throughput, but just the nature of what they take through. So those are sort of, with the waste industry, we're having to keep the industry has to keep an eye on what the government are doing in terms of policies and things. I know there are talk about commingled waste and separating stuff out and everything. So the waste industry really has to keep an eye on what's going on, and obviously then as a waste planning authority need to make sure that we're on top of that and prepared for applications coming up to either vary existing permissions or to create new ones. And again, this goes back to when we're doing the policy work and we're looking at the waste needs, capacity assessments, that sort of thing, just to make sure that we can provide the facilities that are necessary. The bottom left one is just a really standard waste transfer station, so a skip hire company and a waste company. So they go out and sort of, obviously skips go out, come back in, and they sort them out and then put it into the different waste streams for onward recycling. The bottom right one, this was an organic farm that had permission to take dirty water, so non-sewage, but sort of dewatered sludge, if you like, from wastewater treatment works. I have to say, having seen what's been floating on there, I would never eat organic food. I would give me chemicals at any time. But again, this is just one where it was a farm diversifying. They no longer needed the slurry lagoon. So an application came to us to basically use it for wastewater, effectively, to be spread on the land for organic farming. So this is the other sort of extreme of things. So this is the Newhaven Energy Recovery Facility. It's a huge building, and when we were dealing with the application for this, it wasn't very popular. We had, I think, 16,500 objections, and so it was very controversial at the time. It was on land that was allocated for waste uses. So this is at the end of North Quay and Newhaven. The design was a challenge because it's adjacent to what was an area of outstanding natural beauty, which is now the South Downs National Park. So the building's actually sunk down by 19 metres. So from an engineering point of view, when construction was going on, it was really amazing. It was fantastic to watch it. So this facility, it can handle, I think it's 235,000 tonnes of waste. Originally, when permission was granted, there was a condition limiting it that it could only be from waste from within the plan area, so the administrative area of East Sussex and Brighton and Hove. Because recycling rates increased, then the actual volume of household waste going in here went down, and so they need to keep a certain, obviously, throughput of waste. So the condition was relaxed to allow, obviously the priority is for plan waste, but waste from outside the area can go into the facility, and it generates electricity for about, I think it's about 22,000 houses. And it's been there. It was interesting, we had a planning application recently to do with another site near this. But one of the people that came along and spoke basically said, oh, we had the incinerator, they called it, imposed on us all those years ago, but we don't have any problems from it. No odours, no issues, nothing. So it's actually turned out, I think, not to be as concerning as people perhaps thought. So just some more photographs on the ERF. The top right one is just showing some bays where street sweepings can go in there, and you can see in the distance there some housing. So it really is sat in the middle of the town, pretty much. So that was quite a challenge. The top right photograph, again, is just showing residential areas and then the weighbridge as you come in. And just the long building, and you can see in the right-hand side, I'll come onto that in on the next slide, but that's basically a facility that takes bottom ash from the energy recovery facility. The tipping hall, which is where the lorry is going into, it operates on a negative pressure. So the doors are kept closed all the times, except when lorries are going in to deliver, and then they open. But because it's a negative pressure, all this sort of the air gets sucked in, and so there's no odour escaping whatsoever. So you could be stood right where effectively have taken that photograph, or even closer, and you wouldn't get a whiff of your black bag waste and everything. So what happens is the lorries tip in there, and then the waste goes into these sort of like 4 big bunkers, and then you've got these 2 guys up in the control room. It's a bit like, oh, it's fantastic. They won't let me have a go, which is really unfortunate. But you know, if you go to the fairgrounds, you have those things where you get the claw and you have to move it, and you sort of drop it and sort of pick up a cuddly toy and then hopefully get it. Well, you've got these 2 guys sat in these sort of like space age chairs with these controls, and they basically have got these 2 great big grabbers, and they're going around, and what they do is they mix the waste up, because you have to get the right calorific value for when it goes into the furnaces and everything. So you know, they might have, say, a bits of a sofa or something, and then mix it with other things, and that goes into a hopper and then into the furnace. If anyone is ever down sort of Newhaven Way and wants a site visit, then let me know, because to do a tour of that is really great, and you get to go inside, you can see all the furnaces and everything. But so a lot of design went into it to basically minimise the impacts and everything. And then the other photographs just of one of the inside near the turbines. It's quite space agey. So this is the IBA facility. So that's incinerator bottom ash, or inert bottom ash, as some people call it. So you can see the ERF on the top left, and then sort of to the right of that, there's a long shed, which is the one you can see in the other photographs. So basically, originally what was planned is that the bottom ash would go out by road. But what happened is an operator set up a site here, and they brought back online the rail sidings. So the bottom ash comes out of the ERF by tractor and trailer, and then is stored in the building until it's full, and then they get a train come in, takes it off, and it goes up to a site where it's reprocessed, and effectively it's turned into like a roadstone, sort of like a road sub-base. So certainly when we were having the Bexhill Hazing Link Road, the road scheme I showed the photograph of earlier on, when that was being constructed, what we had the bottom ash going out of Newhaven, up being processed, and it came back to Newhaven, loaded onto trucks, then it went over and was used in the road scheme. So and it's, I suppose the word ash is a bit misleading. It's not really like ash. It is like stone, and it's not what you'd get from a household bonfire sort of thing. It's lumps of rock and everything, which is why it's repurposed. In terms of the fly ash, which is another byproduct, that's classed as hazardous waste. So that goes off, I believe it goes to the salt mines in Cheshire, where it's buried, because it is hazardous. Okay, just some more waste sites. Again, small scale, you've got tyre baling. They do nothing more than get waste tyres and then bale them up, and then they go off for sort of processing elsewhere. We have got another facility in the county which actually does process the tyres, so it sort of breaks them down into a crumb, and then they're reused. It might be for equestrian arenas or kids' play parks, that sort of thing. We've got scrapyard. We've got quite a few of those in the county. And the bottom left is one where obviously, with loads of development going on, there's loads of muck away and spoil that's generated. So this is an operation where they do muck away, and then they put it through a screener like this, which sorts out the materials into different grades, and then they sort of mix it with, say, compost or something, and they sell it on as either a sub base or topsoil. So again, it's quite small scale. And then the other one, which is an aerial photograph of a former quarry. So it's a former chalk quarry, but it's a huge, strategically important waste transfer station. And many years ago, when there were the fridge mountains, because there were no waste companies that could process the gases from the fridges and everything, this is one of the first companies that actually got the equipment to deal with them. So again, it's a really important facility, and it's so hidden away you wouldn't know that it's there, because although it's next to the main A27, it's well screened, it's tucked in a former quarry, and it's, yeah, you don't get sort of views into it at all. So this is a MRF, a materials recovery facility. So basically, this is where, so if you put your dry recyclables out for your sort of collection for your local council and everything, or skip companies have had sort of waste, they take it here, and what happens is it gets loaded, so it gets tipped into the hall, which is the top right corner, top left picture. The top right one is then to the right of the picture, you can just see a yellow conveyor going up. Basically, the waste gets put onto a conveyor, and it goes through the grey thing, which is a picking shed. So there's a conveyor that goes all the way through there, and there are people stood in there basically picking out each type of the different waste, dropping it. So there'd be a sign. So the first one would be cardboard, because that's what you can see on the right hand side. The next one along will be plastic. So they all got the type of waste they're looking for to drop down their chute. And then what happens with the cardboard in particular, the bottom left is a baling machine. So what happens is basically once they've got a quantity of cardboard, they put it into there, or plastics, and then bale it up. And the right hand side photograph is sort of the end product of the baled waste. What they do is, because of the size of this facility, the markets go up and down with the different recyclers. So what they will do is they'll stockpile. If the market's gone down on a certain product, then they will stockpile it until the market goes back up again. I think so. It's all about basically not sending stuff to landfill. So we also deal with wastewater treatment works, and again, the scale can be something massive. This is the Peacehaven wastewater treatment works, which the photograph, which is the Google Maps one I've got on there, you can just see that sort of oval shaped thing with a little chimney sticking out. That's actually the green roof. So the wastewater treatment works is under that. And so this was designed, because of the sensitivities of landscape, it was designed so that it would have the green roof, which I think is one of the largest in Northern Europe in terms of green roof, the grass roof. The top photograph is actually stood up on the roof, and then sort of just the inside of it. So this is a really high-tech facility. It doesn't actually deal with any wastewater from the county of East Sussex. It actually deals with Brighton and Hove's wastewater. So that there's, as part of this planning application we dealt with, there was an 8-mile tunnel that comes from Brighton all the way across, and then it's treated here, and then it's pumped out, and there's a long sea outfall that goes out. I think it's about a kilometre and a half out to sea, and water's discharged there. But again, this is, we've got several large scale wastewater treatment works, and one of the things that, with the development going on, loads of housing and everything, what we're having to look at is how much capacity have these facilities got to take on all these thousands of new homes that are going to be constructed and built, because obviously they're all going to want to connect to the sewer network. So that's something which we liaise closely with the water companies. Is like, okay, well, do you have capacity? What is going to be your cut-off point and everything? So we can start planning, say, okay, do we need to look at extending existing facilities or creating new facilities altogether? So in terms of landfill, the top 2 photographs were taken in 2004 and the bottom 2 in 2007. And then shortly after the 2007 one, the site closed. So we don't currently in East Sussex have any active landfill sites for this sort of waste. It's a former chalk quarry that used to provide chalk for a sort of a nearby cement company. When I was out on these visits, I said to the chap, what depth are we stood on here? And he was like, oh, it's about 50 metres of waste that we stood on. And when you look back now, I think so much of that could have been recycled. And it just shows that in the last 20 years, how leaps and bounds we've gone on about, not putting stuff in the ground and actually recycling so much stuff and everything. So we don't have any current landfill. Stuff or waste that's generated in the county that's not suitable for recycling or to the going to the energy recovery facility will go to other landfill sites. The nearest one to us is at Red Hill in Surrey. But because waste travels huge amounts of distance in terms of to get to the right facilities to treat it. So we don't have any current landfills, and this is what it looks like now it's been restored. So the area behind that dark bit in the middle is basically what was the landfill. It was and I can see it every day from the office. I can just stare across the downs and it's there and everything. But one thing that will carry on happening is it still needs to be monitored, because that's going to leach for 25 years at least. It's going to be gas for it, so there'll be flues there. On this particular one, there are turbines that harvest the gas and then it gets put into the national grid. So again, there are some benefits from it. There's talk about, you hear about landfill mining, but I don't think that there's necessarily much appetite for that at the moment, and so there's probably not the benefits of the expense of doing it to actually go, sort of make it viable. And I've just included this one. This is, I think there must have been sort of like a shortage of tin foil in all the local supermarkets when this went through. So basically, this is a prototype for a clinical waste incinerator. And we dealt with a planning application. Again, it's in Newhaven. It was huge. It just happened at the wrong time. And so we had headlines in the paper saying, burning body parts in Newhaven, all this sort of thing. Because I think people took clinical waste as we were going to be burning people. It's not. It's like your tissue samples, that sort of thing. But it was just quite an interesting thing to see, I just thought it was good use of tinfoil. We have a huge range of different things that we deal with and everything in terms of waste, and there's so many more things that we deal with that I haven't included in here because it's just simply not time. So the development sandwich. So I think probably an analogy, and people that know me get fed off of me saying this, but if you think of development as a sandwich, so what lower tiers authorities do is the nice juicy filling. So you do the housing, you do the employment and commercial stuff, you do the recreational things, so that, which is great. And obviously it's vital, and that's what the government is pushing everything. But a sandwich needs bread. And so I see what we do as being the bread. So at the start of the process, you've got the minerals, because if you want to build houses and infrastructure, you need the minerals to do that. And then equally, once you've built your lovely filling, you need the waste facilities to cope with what that's going to generate, whether it's somebody flushing their toilet, whether it's somebody putting a dustbin out, and where that's going to go and treat and everything. So I don't see us as a county minerals and waste planning authority and local planning authorities, we should be working together, because without each other, then there would be no need for any of this. So it's very much a development sandwich. Just briefly going to go on to other engineering operations. This is basically really, so if you are in a district and borough, is when you get certain applications, really have a think and a good look at actually what you are being asked. An example here is, this is one that we dealt with. So this is actually a gliding club, and the runway they considered unsafe. They needed to import, I think it was 134,000 cubic meters of material, which is a lot of material. So we dealt with it a county matter because of the volume of material being used. So we said, well, you wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't for the waste soils. So the top two just show it's being done, and the bottom two show it once it's completed. They're roughly taken from the same spot, so that was fine. So we dealt with that, not a problem at all. This is an example of an agricultural determination for a farm tract that was submitted to a district council to basically say, I want to do this, put a track through here, is that okay? Do I need permission? Whatever. So the agricultural determination was granted, permission not needed. Then I started getting the phone calls. because what actually happened on the ground, so this is a very 2D plan. You don't see anything there, no cross sections or anything. So then when lorries started running in, and actually it was a nice bluebell gill in a valley, and the road was going straight across it in a straight line. So an awful lot of materials were imported to facilitate that development. So I really would say, and I know that the pressure that Ds and Bs are under in terms of the volume of applications you're dealing with, you don't always have the time, but just dig a bit deeper in terms of looking to see what is actually going on. Okay. So again, this is scrutinised. This is an application that went to a district council for a new barn. Straight away, what leaps out to me is that you've got a change in levels of land to facilitate that barn. But slightly misleadingly, in the supporting statement, it said that some earthworks are proposed. However, it's merely the infilling of a slurry lagoon. No earthworks proposed which would raise the height of the land or would otherwise constitute sort of importation. So that's not quite true. And again, you've got spot heights on here. So the black is the existing heights, the red is the proposed. You can see that there's going to be a change in the level. Again, it was once development started that we started getting the complaints. So the bottom photograph shows the sort of great big mound of earth that's where the land's being raised, which ties in with what the plans were. So it's really ask lots of questions if you do get applications, because sometimes this can be a sham for a waste disposal operation. So, you know, things like, what's the topography? Does it have to be in that location? Why can't you do cut and fill? So you cut into a hill and you use the fill to build up the other side. So just lots of questions and everything, because it's so much easier to ask the questions at the start of the process than then try and either grant something and then find that hundreds of lorries are running in down country lanes. And it's no good coming to us to help, because we can't do anything if the development is lawful, even if it was slightly misleading. So definitely ask lots of questions. I'm conscious time is marching on, so I'm just going to whiz through. I've got a bit about enforcement, which is my absolute passion. It is the Cinderella of the planning service, but I think here in East Sussex we're doing a pretty good job in terms of sort of the waste enforcement that we deal with. Our enforcement is predominantly waste. We don't have many minerals things, so yeah, we get to chase waste all over the county. I'm sure that if you've worked with enforcing college, you know there are two types of breach of planning control: undertaking development, and this goes back to the definition in section 55, and also failing to comply with or contravening conditions attached to a permission. So we will deal with those. Most of our enforcement cases are relating to undertaking development without planning permission, and the disposal of waste is classed as a change of use. Because of the nature of what we deal with and who we deal with, there are some very, very unpleasant people out there. And because there's so much money involved in waste, obviously we're sometimes going onto a site and we'll be saying to a landowner, you can't do this, you've got to stop that and take all of that waste out. And it's going to cost them an awful lot of money. There's also an awful lot of organised crime in waste enforcement. And we seem to have a knack of stumbling across drug factories. Seems to be a lot of that going on. So these are just some of the health and safety issues that we do deal with. Plant and machinery is a big one, because you'd have seen some of the early photographs. There's big bits of kit out there, and you know, if you've got somebody who's doing something they shouldn't do, they won't necessarily be willing to stop. It can be challenging. But we do have a very good enforcement toolkit. I've listed these on here. The one I put in orange there is this is recently coming through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which is an enforcement warning notice. So if there's a breach of planning control and we want somebody to submit an application, they don't, we can serve a warning notice on them, basically saying you will submit a planning application. So that's quite good. But say lots of information there. Some of them, the two, the breach condition notice and enforcement notice, they constitute formal enforcement action. The other ones, the information requisition, planning contravention notice, they're really useful tools in the sense that what we will normally do is write to a landowner as to what's going on, try and get an informal response from them. If they don't, we can serve a planning contravention notice or an information requisition notice, and they have to respond to that within 21 days. If they don't, then it's a criminal offence. And in fact, we prosecuted a landowner twice last year for failing to respond to a planning contravention notice. All he had to do was answer a letter, and he didn't. So that's fine. Disappointingly, the two in grey at the bottom aren't available to county councils, which is so frustrating, because the section 215 untidy land notices, it would be so helpful if we could serve those, because they are just such a useful tool. Unfortunately, county councils can't. Equally, the ASBO and community protection orders and notices, we can't serve those, which is frustrating. As with everything nowadays, there are risks. There are risks of taking enforcement action because of appeals, judicial reviews, costs and everything. And also, if we take enforcement action and then they don't comply with it, then what are we going to do? We can prosecute, but that doesn't solve the breach of planning control. So if we do direct action, then that's a cost to the council. And there's all these things. But equally, I think there are risks in not taking enforcement action. Somebody could judicially review our decision. Reputation is really important. The waste industry is very incestuous, and word gets around. I remember going to a site many years ago. I went to introduce myself, and as soon as I did, he said, "Oh, go away, I know what trouble you can bring," and everything. And it's because I talk to each other. And ombudsman, we can have compensation awards against us if we've done something or we haven't taken action, it's become lawful. So there are risks on both sides, and it's very much a balancing act when we do this. Just got some examples where this is where we resolved things informally. So basically, the top two show this was ballast as dug that was being deposited here by an operator known to me. I think there's a fourth site that I'd come across him. As soon as I walked in, you could physically see him just slump. And anyway, we had words, and he cleared the site, and so the bottom. So that was one where we didn't need to get formal, we didn't need to get nasty, and it was fine, all resolved. In fact, the complainant said, "What did you say to him? Because it's better than it looked before." So that was a good result. After some gentle persuasions, this is one where there's some tipping. As you can see, the top two show it right next to a river. I mean, really? Just depositing soil for no reason. So we wrote to the landowner, nothing, wrote again, nothing. So in the end, we served a planning contravention notice. We asked exactly the same questions. He obviously took it as a bit of a shot across the bow, because he then responded and then restored the site. So that's where it's just a notice which isn't formal action, but it's enough to say, well, if you don't respond, we'll prosecute you. And this is one where, and again, for districts and boroughs, if you're dealing with an application, so this was a new house that had planning permission. You can just see the edge of it on the top right corner. Had planning permission. As part of permission, I don't know if it's through a condition or a 106, but it basically said any spoil from the development should not be deposited within the red line. Well, that was great, but the red line was quite tightly around the property. What it didn't include was the pond opposite. So they thought, well, that's okay, we'll just dump all of that spoil into the ponds, which is in the High Weald, National Landscape, ecological value and everything. So we tried to get them to resolve it. In the end, we served an enforcement notice. Fortunately, they didn't appeal against it, and they reinstated the pond. So that was a result. But unfortunately, had the permission been slightly tighter, then maybe said that you must dispose of it here or something. But anyway, it was we got that one sorted. This is some more formal enforcement action. This is where you go to some sites and you just breaks your heart, and you think people do this to the countryside. Not only do it to the countryside, but also then when you've got livestock and animals there. And this is one where they were repeatedly allowing people to tip, taking money for it, and then burning it. And we thought, this is not acceptable. So again, we took enforcement action, served an enforcement notice on them, and it has stopped. This is a current case. I don't know if the top left-hand picture, you can just see a little yellow blob in the middle. That's an officer from the Environment Agency. He's 6'4", and he stood in a pile of waste. Now, from financial records, we believe that this particular landowner has made in the region of £500,000 from allowing lorries to go in and tip. He was charging between £90 and £120 a load. No planning permission, no environmental permit, nothing at all, totally unauthorised. We are very, very close now to actually getting this resolved, and that's been done informally. We haven't had to go to the extent of having a notice yet, but this is just examples of where hauliers that you see running around because it's so expensive to dispose of waste, they will look at if they can do shortcuts. You'll see people advertising, oh, I've got a hole to fill and this sort of thing. So there's lots that goes on. And, what we couldn't have had is the council saddled with a bill for clearing this site because we'd never get the money back. But fingers crossed, it's ongoing, but it is progressing. So just very briefly, failure to comply with a notice. A breach of planning control is not a criminal offence. And I think that's misunderstood by a lot of people. They think that, well, it's illegal. It's not illegal, it's unlawful, but it's not a criminal offence. But if we serve a notice and they don't comply with it, then that is a criminal offence. And then that's when we can step things up. And we have, we'll get people in for an interview under caution. All correspondence that we then have to send to them at that point has to have the formal caution in it, because anything they say, we would use in evidence. We try to avoid having site meetings if somebody's under caution, because obviously unless you've got a tape recorder, it's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it? A recording device. We would have to obviously write down every single word. We've got RIPA PACE, CPIA, so this is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and the Criminal Procedure Investigations Act. So we all have to have regard to those, because if we screw up on a technicality, the whole thing could get thrown out if we go to court and we haven't followed the procedures. So it's really important. So options available to us is we can prosecute, and that includes Proceeds of Crime Act. So if we can demonstrate that somebody has made money, we can get a confiscation order if we get a successful verdict, and then they have to pay the money that they have made from that criminality. And that's really good, because if somebody breaches that, then they can go to prison for not doing a compensation order. So that's helpful. Direct action, that would be where we go in and do works to restore the breach and then recover the money from the landowner. And extreme cases, we have got compulsory purchase powers, or we could force the sale of land. So an example of prosecution, this is an authorised site, waste transfer station in Newhaven, but there were conditions restricting the height of the stockpiles. So where that bottom white box is and the red arrow pointing up to the top, that's a 4 metre point, and no waste on the site should be stored more than 4 metres high. Well, the eaves on the building to the left are 6 metres. So as you can see, that stockpile in the middle is well above it. We gave them the option to rectify it, basically put it back in accordance. They didn't, so we served a breach of condition notice. They didn't comply with it, so we prosecuted, and that was a successful prosecution. And this is where it's really good, because when we do that, we publicise and word gets out. Bit of direct action going on here. So this was a courtyard in a conservation area, was being used for tipping. In the end, we served an enforcement notice and a stop notice. The landowner didn't comply, and we thought, well, if we prosecute and we're successful, that's great, but it doesn't change what's happening. So we made the decision, we got quotes, and we thought, right, we're going to go in and we do direct action. So we got the police along, we gained entry to the site using our default powers, and then we've got a local company in to basically clear the site. So it was a long day, it was exceptionally, I think it was November, and it was bitterly cold, but, we worked through the day and we got it done. So that was, a great result of going out, great for the residents and everything. We went to court, county court judgment for the money, didn't pay up, so we put a charge on the land. Thank you. And we didn't really think there was any prospect of getting the money back. And about 4 years ago, I was contacted, and basically the land was being sold. And because an enforcement notice goes on the land charges register, when they were doing the conveyancing, it flagged up. And so we then got our money back. So although it took a while, we did get it back. And it just shows that, persevere, take that enforcement action, make sure it's on the register, and then, you can get your money back. This is an ongoing one. So this is somebody operating a scrap metal and waste business out of a terraced property and the rear yard at the back and using the highway at the front. So we didn't think it was acceptable. So we served an enforcement notice in 2014. We've since prosecuted the landowner 3 times. We've taken direct action on one occasion, and it's still going on. it's incredibly frustrating. We are constrained by the Town and Country Planning Act. So if there's antisocial behaviour, other things going on, we can't tackle that. But I mean, they're advertising and scrap and everything. They need things like a scrap metal dealer's license. They need a waste carrier's license. All of those are by other regulatory bodies. So we can't control that. So all we can do is just what we were able to. Most recent prosecution was December last year, and he was ordered to pay. He didn't turn up, so it was heard in his absence. Magistrates were satisfied we proved the case, and he was fined or ordered to pay just under £8,000. And again, this is where we go for maximum publicity if we can. Mentioned other regulatory bodies. So joint working is really key to what we do. And it's just an example of some of the organisations we deal with. We get involved with stop check searches on roadsides, and when we've got HMRC, the police, trading standards, Environment Agency, everything, that's really useful for us, because if we pull over somebody who's carrying waste, we ask them where they're going to, and that gives us an indication. If they say, oh, Farmer Blog's up the road, it's like, well, we know that doesn't have planning permission. So it's all just joint working. It's really, really important, because on our own, yes, we have successes, but it's limited. And if we can get as much disruption, then that's great. Just some examples of joint working. This was the fire service approached us because they had an arson hotspot. And it turns out we actually had an extant enforcement notice on the site. So we were able to go to the landowner and say, whether you're doing this or not, you own the land. If you allow this to continue to happening, we will prosecute. So again, with a bit of education from the fire service for the landowner and our sort of pressure, then that was, we were able to resolve this one. This, I think, is one of the worst cases I ever went to. This is ancient woodland in the High Weald. It looks a bit disorganised, but actually really, really organised. And what had happened, it was an elderly man had the site, and he'd passed away, and one of his relatives had carried on doing things, but without the instructions, say, okay, you need to take that to that waste site. He'd just carry on collecting stuff, knew that scrap metal had a value, so he would take that to get money for it, but the rest just built up and up and up. So we worked with the Environment Agency, and we actually served an enforcement notice on the site, but and that was mainly because the vulnerability of the landowner. We didn't want an unscrupulous operator to come along and then say, oh, look, this has gone on for 10 years, it's lawful. So we served an enforcement notice to stop the clock. But then we gave them, I think, 2.5 years to clear the site. And we had monthly meetings with the agency and the landowner and somebody representing him to basically work through and clear it. And that was great. So that worked really well. And it's one of those ones you go onto the site and you think, oh, we're never going to deal with this. But actually, because of the personnel involved, it worked really well. So this is utilising our resources. This is a site basically where travellers were involved, but there was a lot of waste activity going on. And because of the history of the occupants, we asked the police to go along with us. So we just have a bit of protection. They refused to do so. But they sent the police helicopter up for us instead, so we could get some intel on what was going on the site, so we knew what we were walking into, and we had a code word for them for if we got attacked, and we could call them. So that was a different joint working, but it resulted in a good outcome in the end. And then we are literally, I'm on the home straight, I promise you. So site monitoring, which is really important. At the moment, we're a bit struggling resource-wise, but we have, so basically there's some regs that say the waste regulations 2011 basically say that we must inspect waste sites that we grant planning permission for at least annually. And we've also got, that came in 2006, and obviously the fees have been updated, but we can charge to monitor landfill and mineral sites. We can do up to 8 chargeable visits a year. So we've got 2 pieces of legislation that say you will inspect and this is what you can do, but equally we've got our own site monitoring policy as well. So site monitoring, it relates to sites which have a valid planning permission. I've just mentioned about the chargeable, non-chargeable and everything. The county council development one is a bit more limited. We would say a small scheme at a school we wouldn't necessarily monitor, but things like the road scheme, where is 20-year ecological monitoring, and obviously we're doing that. So it looks at both the physical works and the conditions, because most of the permissions that we grant in terms of sort of waste and minerals facilities, they will have a restriction on vehicle movements, hours of operation, hours of sort of within those hours of operation, certain things they can and can't do. So it's really about monitoring not just what's being built or constructed, but actually during construction and then post-construction, the operation. The frequency is determined really on if someone's got a history and that sort of thing, and again, resources dictates that actually we can't monitor it as much as we would like, and then if breaches are identified, initially an operator will be given an opportunity to resolve things. Failing that, would obviously go down the enforcement route, which usually would probably be a breach of condition notice, because there's no right of appeal for that, and it's just straight to the court if they breach that. So just in terms of benefits, again, it's proactive. We're identifying potential breaches at an early stage. I think relationships with the operators is really important. When we first rolled out the site monitoring, there's a lot of reluctance to it, but I think they then come see, you build up the rapport and relationship with them, and then it's very much they say, oh, well, whilst you're here, I was thinking of doing this. So they get a bit of free pre-app and everything. Public perception as well. I think if we're going to grant something which so many people have been unhappy about and have taken the time to object to, then I think that they must have that confidence that we will monitor developments to make sure that their worst fears aren't realised. And also for our planning committee members, we often ask them to make really tough decisions. So if they've got the confidence that we're going to monitor the conditions development that they've been party to agreeing to, I think that's really good. So it's just I don't see any disbenefits to it, and also you get to go to great sites like the mine and all these different wonderful waste and minerals sites. So that is the end of a whistle-stop tour of the wonderful world of minerals and waste. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry it's gone on for a lot longer than I thought it would do. But if you're in a lower tier authority, go and speak to your minerals and waste colleagues. Go and say, can I come and spend a day with you? Can I go around these sites and everything? Have a chat with them and everything. And you should, in certainly rural areas, probably have quite a lot of contact with them as well, because there will be overlaps when waste is coming in because it's to facilitate another development that's been granted. But just stick your neck out there and just go and engage with your minerals and waste colleagues. You'll enjoy it. So that is me. I will stop talking now. I'll stop sharing as well.